Hey, it's Bertaki and welcome back to my tutorial series. Previously, we worked on the player movement controller, and this time we will be working on the animations and aim offsets so it's not just a solid object walking around. In the previous video, there was an error made, so let's open back up the player blueprint. All right, so we'll go to the viewport. And then this is where we checked the checkbox for the pitch. So we need to uncheck that. And I believe it was the mesh. And then, no, not the mesh. It's the spring arm. Search for rotation. Use pawn control rotation. Check that. Compile save. And now it's just the camera moving around. So now we will add animations to where we can walk. And with the aim offset, we'll be able to look up and down and lean back and forward. So, with that out of the way, we will first add a file, into our character file, a content, player character, and add a new file here. And we will name it animations. So you can go into there. And for the first file we will add a blend space. Oops, that's not going to pop up. But animations, blend space. And then you want to select the SK mannequin skeleton. Name it BS underscore BS walk. Okay, now we can enter into our blend space. So here on the left under asset details, you can expand the horizontal axis and we will name this velocity. And we will do the maximum axis 600. The grid divisions, we'll change this to 2. And we are good on this part. So with the clear those out of the way. Now we will add our animations that we want to blend together. So we can search for our idle. If you use the male figurine, you want to use the MM. If you use the female, you want to use the MF. As I'm using Quinn, the female version, I'll be using the MF. You can just drag it onto the display here in the middle. Just drag it to the bottom left, make sure velocity and none is zeroed. Then we will look for run forward. Drag it to the bottom right, make sure it's at the maximum velocity and none is zeroed. We can save that. Then we will reopen our content drawer. We'll add a new animation blueprint. Target the SK mannequin skeleton again. Create. We'll name this ABP underscore player. Enter. Now we will go into the blueprint. So here's the animation graph. This is where we tell the engine what animations to play. And before we get to this, we want to open the event graph on the other tab. So just above the default that the engine gives us, we want to right click and add a event initialize animation. And this try get pawn owner, I want to drag it up to the initialize. I'll make a little bit more space. There we go. Now we want to promote the return value on the try get pawn owner. We'll name this player. Enter. And we'll set the event initialize to go into player. And for the animation blueprint, when you add a lot of animations, it tends to get cluttered down here in the variables. So we will separate it, this reference, into components. So under their details category. And then now when we want to add more references into our components, we can just click the drop down and click on it. And we want to drag off of the player and get movement component. We'll promote this as well. And we'll name it movement component. Now we'll add this into our component category. Align those. Now we want to do our event blueprint update animations. So, in previous projects I've had, we want to make sure we get a valid reference, or else it can screw up the animations. So we will drag the movement component in, we'll get it, and then right click it and convert it to a validated get. So this makes sure we have our references set before we start playing our animations. And to help keep it organized off of the isValid, we will drag it into a sequence. And we want to start getting our movement data. So off of the then 0, we are going to get our velocity. So reference to the movement component. And then get vector, not vector, velocity. Then off of velocity, we want to get our x, y, vector length xy. That goes up and promote. We will name this ground speed. And we will organize this into our movement data category. And drag off of the then into ground speed. And we want to create a new variable. And we'll name it is moving. And get a branch. Drag off of the setter into the branch. And we want to drag off of the variable that we just set, get a more equals, greater equals than 0.1. And we want to set the is moving on true to is moving, and then false, keep it false. And I'll categorize this into the movement data. So what this branch does is that if we are not moving on the ground over like a small amount, this will prevent the animation from playing over minuscule movements. And sometimes when you're in the air, it'll play the animations for walking, and this will help prevent that. On the next one, now we want to get our control rotation for when we have our body lean. We'll refer to the player this time. Get player. We'll get control rotation. But we just want a single axis on the pitch. So we will split the pin. And we want to clamp the Y value. Float. And then the minimum we'll do -90, and maximum we'll have it as 90. And then promote this return on the clamp. This will be our pitch. And I will categorize it into our movement data. Drag off the next then pin, put it into the pitch. That's all we need for our event graph. So make sure you compile and save, and we will be moving to our animation graph. First thing we're going to do is add a default slot. Drag it into our output pose. And just before it, we are going to add a state machine. We'll name this locomotion. And we'll drag it into our default slot. Compile, you'll notice that there is a compiler warning that there are no connections or animations playing. And that's okay because we are going to add them. Let's go into locomotion and drag off of entry, add a state. We'll call this idle. Now you can go into idle, and then the content, we can search the idle we used, put that into the input. So now when you compile it, you'll see on the preview that our player is idling. I want to go back out to the locomotion, drag off of idle, and add another state. And this will be our walk state. Now we want to drag from the walk state back to the idle and create another arrow. Now with the arrow moving from the idle towards the walk, we want to open up this menu, and there will be a Boolean check. We want to drag is moving off, put it in there, pile, and forgot to do it on the other side. On the other arrow, drag off is moving. This time we want to add a not Boolean and drag this into our result. File, and no errors currently. And before we open up our walk, let's go into back into the idle. Select the idle animation and make sure the loop box is checked in the details. I'll back out and go into walk. Search for the blend space we just created, BS walk, and grab our ground speed variable that we created and just plug that into velocity. Drag off the pose into the output, file and save. And this is it for our animation graph. So I'm going to check really quick, make sure this is all working. It is not. So before we want to go back into our player blueprint. And I still have rotation searched. Let's clear the search. And close to the top, just below the transform, the animations, I want to make sure it's using an animation blueprint and it's using ABP player. File and save. Now you'll see our player is walking. Turn really fast, it's kind of only moves in one direction. And in the future, we'll be adding more to the blend space so that it can go sideways, backwards. But as for now, we will just be going forwards. Hit escape. And you'll notice we don't look up or down. So we will add a aim offset for this so that our player can look up and down with our camera. So open up your content drawer. And while we're still in the animations file, we'll add a new folder and call this AO for aim offset. We want to make sure it's open on our search here. We will go to content and we will search for the idle animation we used. So this is the idle I'm using. So I'm going to right click and duplicate it. I will name this MF underscore idle underscore forward. Now we'll drag this into our aim offset file. Go back into the aim offset file, and we will open up our animation that we have just duplicated. Now here, we want to pause this before you start doing anything. Drag it out all the way back to the beginning to the first frame. And we want to remove the rest of them. Right click. Sometimes it's a little hard to get exactly where we want it. But if you click close to the red box here at the top left of the time frame, it'll let you remove from frame 1 to frame 131. We hit play. You'll notice they're not moving because we only have one frame in our animation. Now in our asset details, we want to create an additive. Additive settings, additive animation type. We'll make it a mesh space. We'll do selected animation frame. Now we want to reference the idle animation that we base this on. Since I use the MF idle, I'm adding that into there. I'll save it. And this is the forward, so we're not going to change any of the angles. So we can just reopen our content drawer and duplicate this twice. First one that we have duplicated, we'll rename it to idle up. And the latter, we'll rename it to idle down. And we can open the idle down and double check, since they all look the same, that we are editing the idle down. Now we will go into the skeleton tree. I will select spine 3, and we will just rotate it towards the back. 60. Looks kind of funny. Yeah, we'll just keep it at 60 degrees. And then we want to press add key, save, reopen the content drawer. This is idle down. I went the wrong direction. We'll make it positive. Add key. Save. Now we go into idle up and make him face the other way, looking up. Add the key, save. And that should be all 3 of our base poses. Now for the aim offset, we will add a new file, not file, yes file, new animation file, aim offset. Target the SK mannequin. We'll call this AO aim. You can open this up. Our aim offset open. We can go into the asset details, horizontal axis. We'll name this pitch. Minimum axis, we'll do -90. Maximum, we'll make it 90. Grid divisions, we'll make it 2. Enter. Now we need to drag in our forward, idle forward, drag this into the middle. Make sure pitch is 0 and none is 0. And we want our up. Drag it to the bottom right. Pitch 90, none 0. And then down. Drag this into the bottom left. -90, none 0. Save. And now we will go back into our animation blueprint of our player. Let's create some space. Then we will delete the line from our default slot, add in our aim offset, plug in default slot into the base pose, put the output into the output pose, get our pitch variable, get it, plug that into pitch. File, save, test this out. Looks like it's snapping. It's not doing what I want it to. After checking my notes, I don't believe it was a fault in my notes. I used the wrong clamp. It is inside the animation blueprint event graph. I clamped the float by accident, and I should have clamped the pit, or clamped the angle. So clamp angle, min, -90, max 90, plug the return back into the pitch. Compile, save, let's test it out. It is leaning forward when we look down, leaning up when we look up. So this is exactly what we want. And you can see you will have to play with the spine a little bit. It's kind of leaning over a little bit funny, but this is our aim, offset, and walking animation. Let me know what you think of the video. If it helped you at all, feel free to leave a like if you want to see more. It would help me a lot if you subscribed. And we'll see you in the next one. Peace out.